Howdy, folks. It's your boy Max Mogren live for you here at Wake Up News. It's not nuclear winter, but it sure feels nasty out there. This is about the fourth day of horrible smoke here in Idaho on the Wyoming-Idaho border. And wearing that stuff at the beginning of the video just to get a cool picture to put out there. Thank you all for tuning in. We got 24 viewers already. This is Wake Up Wyoming. Again, big news today, wildfires. The air quality here in Idaho is atrocious. Interestingly, if you take a look at the map here, see if that'll show up. There's wildfire conditions there. You can see Wyoming, that's Yellowstone in the middle. This is the air quality index. Red is more hazardous, green is not hazardous. You'll notice the entire state of Wyoming in the center there. There's no data. Why? Because we don't have any monitoring stations, apparently. It's so smoky out there right now, I can barely see the mountain that's about 2 miles away. Yet we get no alerts about the air quality here in Wyoming because there's no monitoring. That's your government tax dollars at work. Again, this is Wake Up Wyoming here, Wake Up News from beautiful Alpine, Wyoming. Today we're looking at two papers, the Monday and Tuesday edition of the Jackson Hole Daily. Again, this paper services the wealthiest county per capita in North America. Okay, can't stress that enough. So this is what the billionaires are reading. This is what the tax dodgers are reading. Like the rest of the country, the average person here in Jackson Hole or the Jackson Hole area is just squeaking by. Okay, you know, it's a microcosm of a macro problem. There's lots of jobs available, but they're not very good. Meanwhile, the people that don't work are collecting billions and billions of dollars through the fraudulent stock market. It's a big scam. We're not afraid to expose the truth here at Wake Up Wyoming. Also got a great book. While we're on the topic of wildfires, we're going to be taking a look at the big gold coffee table book, appropriately titled Wildfire, A Century of Failed Forest Policy. So it's a good one, classic. Wildfire is a natural thing. The natives actually used to start wildfires to manage the land. In recent years, the Western world, we've kind of waged war on wildfires. We see them as something bad that we need to control, when in reality, they're a natural part of the ecosystem. But we'll touch on that more later. Let's get right into it. Looking at the Monday edition, wildfires, Jackson fire threat is high, so people be careful. Remember the big eclipse coming up here. If you can't see the sun due to wildfires, it's going to put a real damper on the eclipse. In the opinion section, we've got some immigration stuff. Catherine Rampel teeing off. If Trump were an immigrant, he'd probably be deported under his guidelines. Just more Trump bashing. I'm not a Trump supporter, but it is what it is. Interesting little political cartoon there locally. Hit and rating. Road safety report card F. 25% rise in distracted driving here in Wyoming. Okay, that's big news. These smartphones are designed to be incredibly addicting. Can't stress that enough. Thank you all for tuning in. Karen J. Bowden, what's up? JT Jones, what's up? Alan Morningstar, thanks for tuning in. The smartphone's incredibly addicting. I used to cross-country ski coach a young man, a powerful, brilliant young man who was killed by a distracting driver while roller skiing on the roads in Maine. A Wyoming boy cut down in his prime due to distracted driving. Shocking how addicting these things are. And I'm going to get right into it today. There's a couple good articles, one from Business Insider, one from The Atlantic. Highly recommended about the impact of smartphones on people, on all of us, especially the youth. The Atlantic asking, have smartphones destroyed a generation? More comfortable online than out partying, post-millennials are safer physically than adolescents have ever been, but they're on the brink of a mental health crisis, writes Gene M. Twenge on August 3rd, 2017. That's a great article in The Atlantic. I read that yesterday. Business Insider giving us a nice summary of that today. Teen suicides now outnumber homicides, and smartphone use could be playing a major role, okay? This is important. Like, these technologies are so ubiquitous, so pervasive in our civilization right now, and the kids are so affected by them. You'll see 1-year-olds playing with an iPad while they're at dinner. It's crazy. But it's important to monitor and regulate our own smartphone use. Can't spend all day fiddle fucking around with these things. Suicide among teens is at a 2-decade high, even surpassing the rate of homicide for that age group. Smartphones and social media seem to create feelings of loneliness and may be contributing to the rise. Parents should be mindful of how much time their kids spend on their phones. That's the summary. In 2011, for the first time in more than 2 decades, suicide began killing more teenagers than homicide. And according to research presented in a recent article in The Atlantic, a psychologist, Gene Twenge at San Diego State University, smartphones and social media may deserve a lot of the blame. As teens have started spending less time together, they have become less likely to kill one another, Twenge wrote, and more likely to kill themselves. Over the past decade, psychologists have come to see a picture in which young, developing brains are pitted against the power of brightly colored notifications, relentless pocket vibrations, and addicting apps. A byproduct has been an increase in disorders such as depression and anxiety, which can sometimes be fatal. Twenge's research has indicated that while suicide rates aren't the highest they've ever been, that peak came in the early 90s, before smartphones emerged. The proliferation of screen-based devices and social media has fundamentally changed how people interact for the worse. Okay, it goes on and on. Great article. But what do they find here? 8th graders who frequently use social media increased their risk of depression by 27%. Teens who spend at least 3 hours on devices were significantly more likely to show suicidal tendencies, such as researching ways to kill themselves. Okay, it goes on and on. And it's important to note, too, that here's a good little quote. In the days before social media, not getting invited to a party still felt bad. But the bad feeling most likely went away within a day or two as people stopped talking about the event. With apps that document every party happening in real time and preserve those memories forever, there is never a shortage of reminders that you were left out. Okay? Very good points there in this article from Business Insider. Social media, it's crazy. It's a very powerful force, and we must use it for good. So, thank you all for tuning in today. We got 81 viewers, 92 viewers. Much appreciated. Please like, share, comment. Again, not all your comments show up. If I don't respond to your comment, hit me up again. Aaron Salazar says, is that Sammy Hagar? Cool. No, not quite. But I do like a little Van Halen. Let's see. Moving along. Idaho schools frantic to attract new teachers. That seems like a nationwide trend. Moving on as well, back to the wildfires. Health officials have issued air quality warnings in eastern Washington and Idaho due to smoke from multiple large wildfires. According to air quality officials, strong winds have pushed the smoky haze down from the wildfires raging in BC. We got a lot of wildfires in California, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon as well. Officials said active children and adults and people with asthma or lung disease should reduce prolonged or heavy exertion outdoors. Meanwhile, wildfires burning in surrounding states have also caused poor air quality in southwest Idaho. Warnings have been put out in Boise, Ketchum, and Idaho Falls. Again, I can't stress it enough. You look at the online air quality map, and Wyoming, it looks like everything's fine. You get to the Idaho border where it's, high fire particulate, bad for your health. And in Wyoming, we just don't monitor it. So probably a good idea not to go run a marathon here in Wyoming as well. Similarly to days where they're spraying a lot of chemicals in the sky. Trump here caught throwing 666s in the national and international section. They always do that. They always show him throwing the OK sign, which is the 666, right? It's funny. I do that kind of naturally myself, just as like a force of habit. I don't know why. But it's interesting that they very frequently choose to use those images. You'll see like celebrities doing this, like Justin Bieber. Trump throwing the 666s today. It's just more bash. Decrying most negative media coverage as fake news and personally insulting members of the media, he has inserted himself into the White House's press operations in an unprecedented fashion for a president. Trump has dictated news releases and pushed those who speak for him to bend the facts to bolster his claims. He has ignored the advice of his legal team and thrown out carefully planned legislative strategies with a single 140-character tweet. Okay, so Trump, distracting, divisive, can't stress it enough. You want to know more about the Trump persona? This is a Time magazine from 1989. Okay, what do they say about Trump? This man may turn you green with envy or just turn you off. Flaunting it is the game, and Trump is the name. Naturally, who better to be the president than the ace of diamonds at a time when the billionaires, the banksters, and the stock market, the Federal Reserve, all the plutocrat, criminal, elite ruling class are robbing us blind yet again. Okay, stock market's at all-time record highs. The average American just squeaking by. 3 Marines feared dead off Australia's coast, so that sucks. Maybe you shouldn't join the military and go off around the world to kill other people. Bad karma. But interesting here, the vehicle they were in, the MV-22 Osprey helicopter/plane that they were flying in, launched from the USS Bonhomme Richard and was conducting regularly scheduled operations Saturday when it crashed into the water. So condolences to the family of these missing soldiers or these missing Marines. But important to note there, it's kind of funny, this ship, the USS Bonhomme Richard, anybody know about that? Anybody know the history of that ship? It's pretty wild, pretty wild. I got a great book here by Dave McGowan, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. It's a ship with a lot of history. Right here, who do we got on the bridge of the Bonhomme Richard in 1964? It's Jim Morrison and his dad. Jim Morrison, lead singer of The Doors, and his dad, who was an admiral in the Navy, aboard the Bonhomme Richard. His dad infamously was the commanding officer at the Gulf of Tonkin incident, a staged event used to propel the United States into what? The Vietnam War. Okay, cost hundreds of thousands of people their lives, millions of people their lives. Kind of wild that the Lizard King, held up as an idol for an entire generation, was the son of an admiral in the Navy, don't you think? What's it say? I think these days, especially in the States, you have to be a politician or assassin or something to really be a superstar, says Jim Morrison. Before he was the Lizard King, U.S. Navy Admiral George Stephen Morrison and his son, James Douglas Morrison, on the bridge of the USS Bonhomme Richard, January 1964. So I have to say that ship's getting pretty old, guys. Might be time to retire that one. But it's just interesting that a ship used in the false flag that propelled us into the Vietnam War is still in service, and it's off conducting war games off the coast of Australia right now. China boosts pressure campaign on North Korea. Global pressure campaign on North Korea, propelled by sharp new UN sanctions, received a welcome boost Sunday from China, the North's economic lifeline, as Beijing called on its neighbor to halt its missile and nuclear tests. The new sanctions could cut off roughly 1/3 of North Korea's estimated $3 billion in annual exports, ostensibly denying the nation of funds for its weapons programs. All countries are now banned from importing North Korean coal, iron, lead, and seafood products, and from letting in more North Korean laborers whose remittances help fund Kim Jong-un's regime. Okay, of course they call it a regime. We got a great comment here from Richard Skinner. Nice mask, bro. You're looking tough. Dude, give it a rest. Get a life. Go to work. You look like a hippie that had a bad trip. Richard, what you wearing, bro? Nice mask, buddy. I don't generally feed the trolls, but come on. Cut me some slack. You want to laugh it up? Laugh it up. But the point is, North Korea here, they're going to cut $1 billion from North Korea's $3 billion exports annually. That's huge, okay? That's huge. And, economic sanctions greatly affect the people of these countries. That are targeted by Western powers, by the UN. Oh, Qatar and Israel, okay? You don't know much about Qatar. They are the home of the Al Jazeera network, a news agency, okay? Israel said Sunday it plans to ban Qatar's flagship Al Jazeera network from operating in the country over allegations it incites violence, joining Arab nations that have shut down the broadcaster amid a separate political dispute. The news organization, in turn, said it can take legal action. Blah, blah, blah. So Qatar facing economic sanctions similar to North Korea, being blockaded. It's a landlocked country, I believe, and they're having some serious issues. I got Al Jazeera up here on the phone looking at all their updates from the Qatar Gulf crisis. The latest news after some of the Gulf states in Egypt cut ties with the Qatar and imposed a land, sea, and air blockade, okay? Big cluster there. But it's interesting, one of the demands to raise these sanctions against Qatar is they're supposed to disband, destroy the Al Jazeera network. Pretty disturbing, censorship of the press. In defensejournal.org.uk, Qatar, on August 6th, 2 days ago, Qatar purchases warships from Italy in a $5.9 billion deal. We have signed a contract on behalf of the Qatari Navy to acquire 7 warships from Italy for 5 billion euros, or $5.9 billion. So that's interesting. Things heating up in the Middle East, but what else is new? Not really scared about it, just unfortunate that Qatar, like North Korea, like Russia, like Yemen, like Venezuela, subject to economic sanctions for stepping out of line with the global technocratic bankster financial elites, right? Thank you, Thomas Canby, for your lovely question. I'm listening to this, and it's so true. Preach on, bro. You got it. Thanks. It's nice to get some positive reinforcement instead of folks like Richard Skinner just calling names, I guess I shouldn't have made fun of your mask, Richard, but if you're wearing like a skull mask, you're not going to attract too much positive attention to yourself by wearing a ridiculous mask on the internet. You scared to show your face or what? Venezuela crisis spins further out of control. As Venezuela sinks further into political turmoil, many are looking to the military to see if its once unflinching loyalty to the socialist revolution might be fraying. Okay, there was a little raid there. It's funny they use these, you can tell propaganda because they'll use the word many. Many people wonder whether the tension-filled incident could foreshadow a bigger uprising from the military with a long history of rebellion. Many are looking to the military to see if its once unflinching loyalty to the socialist revolution might be fraying. Political opponents and dozens of foreign governments consider it an illegitimate power grab that will strip Venezuela of its last vestiges of democracy. What are they talking about? They're talking about the new elected council there. So Venezuela, Uncle Sam, Exxon, the military-industrial complex, the global financial elites want to control Venezuela. They want their oil, right? Rest in peace, Chavez. We got some more news on that. Let me see if I can pull something up on the smartphone. The Defense Journal, the UK Defense Journal is trying to sell me fidget spinners. Thanks, guys. Maybe I should play with fidget spinners in my videos instead of this smartphone. Oh, thanks for your patience. Sorry. I think I lost my article on Venezuela there, but important to note what's going on there. Customers pay for nuclear failures in the business section. Okay, all this news. Having spent more than $10 billion, executives in South Carolina Electric and Gas and Santee Cooper acknowledged that all their assumptions were wrong. Worse still, consumers may have to pay billions more on the rusting remains of 2 partially built reactors that may not even go operational. Most of the 18 nuclear projects pending before the Nuclear Regulatory Commission a decade ago have been aborted or suspended indefinitely. None of the 7 projects the NRC licensed are operational. Only one is still being built in Georgia at a cost of $100 million per month. Southern Company financial documents filed Wednesday say the project, slated to cost $14 billion, could cost $24 billion or more if completed. Okay, there's your public infrastructure money getting flushed on nuclear power. Okay, we don't need nukes, right? We have renewables, we have solar, we have wind, we have hydroelectric. Right here in Wyoming, we have the world's largest continental geothermal energy resource. Of course, unfortunately, it was shelved in 1872 when the federal government stole it from the Sheep-Eater Indians and turned it into Jellystone National Park. Not all that inspiring a place, I might add. The geysers are cool, but they kind of lose their allure after about 15 minutes. Yeah, Richard Skinner throwing some 8s, equal signs, and D's in there. Right on, Richard. I think you and I would actually have fun partying together, Richard, so don't hate too hard, man. Let's see. Moving along. So nuclear crazy. Important to note as well, as many of you already know, there are energy technologies out there that have been suppressed. Okay, nuclear, arguably the most dangerous energy technology. you're more likely to die from, say, nuclear radioactive fallout than you are from CO2, from coal and oil and gas, right? But there are things like Nikola Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, which was torn down, which tapped into the electromagnetic gradient between the positively charged ionosphere and the negatively charged Earth's crust. You could create a perpetual lightning strike, generating as much electricity as you wanted for free, too cheap to meter. If you got free, unlimited electricity, what does that mean? Well, you can desalinate as much water as you want, pump it wherever you want, etc., etc. Kind of kills the concept of scarcity that our current financial and economic and civilizational system is built upon. That's why they killed it. Belgian food safety authorities began investigating possible pesticide contamination in eggs in early June, several weeks before the public was made aware of food safety scare now affecting several European countries. Supermarkets have pulled millions of eggs from shelves after the pesticide fipronil was found in Dutch and Belgian poultry farms. Okay, it goes on and on. Fipronil, I looked it up. It is like a flea and tick. It's in like Frontline that you put on your dog when they've got a bad case of fleas, right? It sounds like it's not used here in the U.S. for livestock. And, in Europe, it's pretty cool that they will pull all these eggs when there is a problem. Can't say the same for the FDA here in the good old USA. This is a cool story about a food forest floating into New York City. They took a big old barge and turned it into a floating food forest, teaching people how to forage for food, which is possible even in a place like New York. So that was pretty cool. Release of jihad-related inmates poses problems. Okay, this is classic fear-mongering in the media, right? All these people who have been labeled as extremists, as terrorists in the wake of 9/11. Some of them are getting out of jail right now, and you should be afraid, America. Be very afraid. Of course, they failed to mention here that 9/11 was an inside job, and that the real terrorists are the people who rule us all through fear, right? So, sad to see. I'm not too worried about that. Really cool ad here. Got to give a shout out to Lower Valley Energy, our local utility company. They allow you to buy 100% green power generated with wind at a rate of 6.4 cents per kilowatt hour versus the standard 5.2. Okay, good program to sign up for. Be cool to see more utilities doing something similar, where you pay a slight bit more, an extra penny and a half per kilowatt hour, in order to not destroy the planet as much, right? Moving along, we got sports, we got comments, we're into that, and we're done with Monday. On to Tuesday. Today's paper, crazy news out of Jackson Hole, $100,000 painting swipe. Somebody's been going around to the many art galleries here in Jackson Hole and stealing stuff. They stole a painting, they stole a statue, so that's wealth distribution, so to speak, right? It's shocking. You come here, it's funny. The average person, I can't stress it enough, Jackson Hole, a microcosm of a macro problem. The average resident in Jackson Hole just squeaking by, slightly higher wages than the rest of the country, but not enough to keep up with the standard of living. Meanwhile, the vast majority of the stores here cater to the ultra wealthy, right? You can get yourself a $10,000 watch. You can get yourself a $100,000 statue of a goddamn elk in rut to put in your front yard. You can get Persian rugs made in Afghanistan by slave labor and pay 10 grand for one of those. But, you want to find some affordable things for a normal person, not out there. But let's get right into it here. Tribe to receive students' remains, okay? The federal government, they're sending these 3 students. Little Plume, Horse, and Little Chief died about 135 years ago while attending a government-run Indian school in south-central Pennsylvania. The federal government is paying the estimated $500,000 cost to dig up, process, and return the 3 bodies to Fremont County, Wyoming, which encompasses most of the vast Wind River Reservation. Okay, there's your government at work. Costs $500,000 to move 3 graves. All right. If anybody in the private sector spent that much money on something like that, they would go out of business rather quickly. The government-run Carlisle Indian Industrial School, founded by an Army officer, took drastic steps to separate Native American students from their culture, including cutting their braids, dressing them in military-style uniforms, and punishing them for speaking their native languages. They were forced to adopt European names. More than 10,000 Native American children were taught at the school and endured harsh conditions that sometimes led to death from such diseases as tuberculosis. Little Plume, Horace, and Little Chief likely died from some sort of infectious disease, said the project's chief archaeologist, Sonny Trimble. They are among 181 Native Americans buried in the cemetery. They were the first buried in a different cemetery nearby and were moved in 1927 to the current location. The Army is reaching out to all of nearly 50 tribes whose children attended the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, and officials expect more exhumations and returns to eventually follow. So if there are 181 Native Americans buried in the cemetery, and it costs, about $180,000 per body to dig them up, the Army's going to spend a lot of taxpayer money moving these corpses. Sad to see, what a horrible thing. It's pretty cool that the Jackson Hole Daily put that on the front page, though, because it does showcase the genocide and the cultural assassination of the Native Americans. Governor Meade of Wyoming, is having some events in Jackson at the Village. Governor Meade will be in Jackson Thursday to kick off the Adventure Racing World Cup. It's going to be a smoky one, guys, and deliver remarks for Silicon Coular's annual pitch day. He will give the speech. Both events tie into Meade's economic diversification initiatives known as ENDOW, Economically Needed Diversification Options for Wyoming, ENDOW, which is focused on creating tech and manufacturing industries in Wyoming alongside mineral extraction, tourism, and agriculture. We need to build on recent success in establishing technology as a fourth leg of Wyoming's economic strength, Meade said when he announced the initiative in November of last year. We need to build on the efforts to add value to coal, minerals, and natural resources. We need to build on our success in a growing manufacturing industry. Okay, so that's at the beginning of the Adventure Racing World Cup. Kind of a cool race. First time it's being held in the United States. But the Endow thing here, here's the thought Governor made. Instead of investing more and more money into dying energy sources like coal, maybe we could make use of all the solar and wind resources that Wyoming is endowed with, right? Oh, volunteers sought to help during eclipse overload. Check that out if you're local and you want to help out. Back into the opinion section. Actually, one more really cool local story here. This is important. It's too bad today they should have listed this yesterday, because the executive director of Human Rights Watch, Kenneth Roth, is visiting Jackson Hole today. His talk today at Teton County Library, Human Rights Watch, Confronting Global Challenges to Human Rights, will focus on an ever-changing political landscape and how people can have a role in shaping and defending their core values. The event is free to attend. It begins at noon at the Ordway Auditorium, so it started 20 minutes ago. After more than a generation of progress, the global human rights movement finds itself at a critical moment. The event's description says, "We face traditional challenges from emboldened autocrats, ruthless conflicts, and a mounting flow of refugees. But we also face new threats, a surge in fundamental attacks on the very values underlying our movement." Human Rights Watch, established in 1978, is a nonprofit, non-government human rights organization. So pretty cool that he's speaking here locally. One nice thing about Jackson, very well educated, not very well engaged, but very well educated. And Jackson, a lot of money here, so we get some heavy hitters coming into town. In the opinion section, we got two stories glorifying past presidents and belittling Trump. I don't fault him there, but I do have to say the media sure is critical of Trump. Interesting political cartoon here by Mike Lukovic. I think that's the Atlanta Journal, but I'm not sure. But it's kind of some pedo imagery there. 3 men and a baby. You got three creepy old politicians, McMaster, Kelly, and Mattis, and Trump's their little baby, right? Important to note, Pizzagate emails, that stuff's disturbing. We know for a fact that there's pedophilia within the traditional halls of power, like the Catholic Church, like all organized religion. We know there is pedophilia inside Hollywood, weird scenes inside the canyon. You know, this is about Laurel Canyon covert ops and the dark heart of the hippie dream, okay? Popular music, popular culture in the 60s and 70s, deeply rooted in pedophilia. Naturally, there's a lot of pedophilia within the halls of power, too. If you haven't checked out the Podesta emails on WikiLeaks, I highly recommend that you do sometime. So it's disturbing. It'd be great if the mainstream media would cover these sorts of things. It's funny, they'll always go after the Catholic Church for pedophilia, but everybody else is off limits. Interior to give states leeway on sage grouse. The sage grouse on the endangered species list, but it doesn't sound like, you know, this is a move in favor of energy development that threatens the sage grouse. It's sad that we have to cite a bird in order to halt development. The Interior Department on Monday unveiled a plan to protect the threatened sage grouse that gives western states greater flexibility to allow mining, logging, and other economic development where it's now prohibited. Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke announced a strategy on the ground-dwelling bird that has suffered a dramatic population decline across its 11-state range. Zinke insisted that the federal government and the states can work together to protect the sage grouse and its habitat while not slowing economic growth and job creation. Nada Culver, a senior policy official at the Wilderness Society, denounced the new plan as an attempt to abandon habitat protection for unfettered oil and gas development in the West. Kathleen Skama, president of the Western Energy Alliance, a Colorado-based group that represents the oil and gas industry, said offering states more flexibility was a step in the right direction, but did not go far enough to rewrite the 2015 plan. Okay, so as expected, the Trump administration rolling back regulations that would slow the development of outdated, obsolete fossil fuels in the U.S. We should be doing what Europe's doing, investing in cleaner, safer, more reliable energy technologies. The Interior Department on Monday scrapped an Obama-era rule on coal royalties that mining companies had criticized as burdensome and costly. The Trump administration put a royalty valuation rule on hold in February after mining companies challenged it in federal court. Officials later announced plans to repeal the rule entirely. The final repeal notice was published Monday in the Federal Register and takes effect September 6th. Repealing the rule provides a clean slate to create workable valuation regulations, said Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, adding that the repeal will reduce costs that energy companies would otherwise pass on to consumers. The decision reinstates rules in place since the late 1980s governing royalties paid by energy companies for coal and other minerals produced on federal and tribal lands. Interior remains committed to collecting every dollar due, Zinke said, noting the public lands are assets belonging to taxpayers and Native American tribes. So, coal, rolling back rules. Sad. More wildfire news. Can't stress that enough. Disturbing stuff. Moving along. So, we got classic here in the national international section. We got some coverage on 9/11. The remains of a man killed in the World Trade Center on 9/11 have been identified nearly 16 years after the terror attacks, medical examiners said Monday. The office uses DNA testing and other means to match bone fragments to the 2,753 people killed by who? By the hijackers who crashed airplanes into the Trade Center's Twin Towers on September 11th, 2001. Okay? The planes didn't bring down the towers on 9/11. Anybody with a critical bone in their body, anybody with the capacity for independent logical thought, knows that two planes can't take down three skyscrapers designed to sustain a direct hit from a big plane. Okay, these buildings were blown up. It was a controlled demolition. It was a false flag, inside job, staged event, an act of terrorism designed to put us into this endless global war on terror, right? Naturally, one of the best ways for the people in power to trick people is to accuse others of doing what they're doing. You blow up a bunch of your own citizens, you blame it on somebody else, you terrorize the whole world, but what do you claim? We're fighting terrorism. Sad. More Trump bashing. North Korea vows revenge. North Korea vowed Monday to bolster its nuclear arsenal and gain revenge of 1,000-fold against the United States in response to tough UN sanctions imposed following its recent intercontinental ballistic missile tests. Okay, so we got all these inflammatory statements against the U.S. coming out of North Korea. This is propaganda. This is fear-mongering. This is designed to make Americans scared. Can't stress it enough. North Korea stands to lose billions after United Nations imposes sanctions. Okay? It's going to cost them, their total exports are about $3 billion annually. This is going to cut them down to about $2 billion. They're going to lose 33% of their revenues from exports. That's huge. Huge hit to North Korea. North Korea is not going to nuke the Western U.S., right? I started off this video wearing a gas mask, just kind of clowning around, right? We're taught to be scared. It's like back in the 50s and 60s where you're supposed to get down under your desk, duck and cover, kids. That's programming, teaching the children to be afraid, the Cold War with Russia. It's the same sort of thing. They're trying to trick us into being scared that North Korea is going to nuke us. It's not going to happen, okay? It's not going to happen. But what does that do? What does all the fear-mongering do? Well, it justifies attacking North Korea with economic sanctions. It justifies spending more money on the military and the severely screwed up foreign policy the United States has implemented around the world for decades. Chicago files sanctuary cities lawsuit. This is kind of cool. Chicago fighting back against the federal crackdown on immigrants, okay? I love Mexicans. They're, as a whole, to stereotype, to generalize, Mexicans who come to the United States are hardworking, friendly, family-oriented, pleasant, peaceful people, right? And, arguably it drives wages down in the U.S. when more people show up and are willing to work for less money. But we can't really blame the Mexicans for that. We can't really blame the immigrants that the economies of their countries are so screwed up that they choose to hop into the back of sweltering semis and put their lives at risk to get somewhere where they can survive, to get somewhere where they can make enough money to send back to sustain their families back in their home countries, right? It's the corporations, it's the banksters. Those are the people to blame, not the working class folks who are just trying to squeak by like the rest of us. But in Chicago, the government, the lawsuit Chicago filed says, cannot unilaterally set new conditions that weren't approved by Congress and that would federalize local jails and police stations, mandate warrantless detentions in order to investigate for federal civil infractions, sow fear in local immigrant communities, and ultimately make the people of Chicago feel less safe. Chicago's sanctuary policies date back to the mid-1980s, and successive city councils have confirmed or expanded the protections. The city prohibits police from providing federal immigrations and customs officials access to people in police custody unless they're wanted on a criminal warrant or have serious criminal convictions. City authorities say the policies help encourage residents of the immigrant community to inform police when they are victims of crimes. The lawsuit, which names Attorney General Sessions, seeks to remove the immigration-related conditions for the grant applications. Okay, the federal government trying to withhold money from cities that won't let them have access to any immigrants in their jails. Okay, moving along. U.S. reports safe sites for drug injection possible. Okay, there's one place, sounds like it's in San Francisco, where you can go and shoot up heroin with adult supervision, right? Advocates and some politicians in recent years have called for government-sanctioned injection centers as the U.S. grapples with the opioid epidemic. More than 52,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2015, the most ever, fueled by soaring abuse of heroin and prescription painkillers. Okay, the opioid epidemic is serious. I know a lot of people who have suffered from this. Close friends. I had two friends die last winter. due to opioids, and I'm pissed off about it. Why? Where are these drugs coming from? Well, the ones that aren't artificial, synthetic, are coming from Afghanistan. Who controls Afghanistan? That would be Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam, the largest drug and arms dealer in the history of modern human history. Interesting article here today from our friends at Business Insider. Drug overdoses are killing way more Americans than we thought. Drug overdose rates, here we go. A new study suggests that the death toll from drug overdoses in America is much more severe than reported. In December, the CDC said 52,404 people had died from drug overdoses in 2015, with over 60% dying from opioids and heroin. Okay, that's the statistic we see here too, 52,000. Overdose numbers have been rising for years, but new research published yesterday in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine suggests that those rates are dramatically underreported. One reason for the gap: in many overdose cases, no specific drug is identified as the cause of death. Between 1999 and 2014, up to 1 in 4 drug overdose deaths had no single drug listed as a cause. That doesn't mean researchers who want to correct their figures are out of luck, however. Even in cases in which no specific drug is listed, officials do often list at least one category of drug present in their body. Okay, nationally, the corrected death rate using the newspaper's method from opioid painkillers was 24% higher than rates reported in 2014. The rate for heroin was 22% higher. In the states where gaps between reported and actual death rates were greatest, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and Louisiana, the percentages differed by up to 108%. So long story short, that figure of 52,000 could be off by 24%. There could be 24% more. So what is that? Add another 13,000 deaths onto there, bring us up to 66,000, 65,000. So sad to see the opioid epidemic unfortunately raging. Not surprisingly, the pharmaceutical companies who are ripping us off, the government who's ripping us off, are behind it. Okay. Here we see some classic propaganda against Venezuela. Man speaks out on voter coercion in Venezuela. Okay, they found one guy in Venezuela in a wheelchair, get some pity, some sympathy right there. And they said he lost his job because he refused to vote in the recent election in in Venezuela. Excuse me. We're just talking about Afghanistan. So this is a classic example of propaganda. This entire article is based on the testimony of one man. Okay? They don't cite any other sources. This guy just says, hey, I lost my job because my boss told me I had to vote, and I didn't, and they fired me. Okay, so demonizing Venezuela, calling into question their democratic process here in a country where our democratic process is severely screwed up. Moving along. Business section. Tech firms lift indexes to new highs. Okay, stock markets, as usual, all-time record highs. All-time record highs in the stock market. Weird. It's funny because the average American, like I said, just squeaking by. The S&P 500 closed at all-time high, as did the Dow Jones Industrial Average. The latest gain extended the Dow's winning streak to 10 days. Investors have welcomed the positive earnings growth, pushing the market further into record territory, fueling speculation about how high the market can go before there is a pullback. What you want to see is a broad range of stocks pushing the market higher, and what we're seeing are fewer stocks pushing the market higher, Crosby said. That's not necessarily a prescription for a major pullback, but it's something to watch. Okay? Can't stress it enough. The reason the stock market's at all-time record highs is pretty straightforward. The Federal Reserve has a program called QE Infinity, where they're printing and gifting about $85 billion a month to fund deficit spending in the government and to prop up the stock market, right? To boost corporate earnings, banks' earnings. It's a big joke. And again, it doesn't trickle down to the average person, right? There's a funny thing here. Well, what is Alan Greenspan saying? Former Fed chairman quoted here on Mish's Global Economic Trend Analysis on Friday, August 4th, 2017. Former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan issued a bold warning Friday that the bond market is on the cusp of a collapse that will also threaten stock prices. In a CNBC interview, the longtime central bank chief said the prolonged period of low interest rates is about to end, and with it, a bull market in fixed income that has lasted more than 3 decades. The current level of interest rates is abnormally low, and there's only one direction in which they can go. And when they start, they will be rather rapid, Greenspan said on the Squawk Box show. I have no time frame on the forecast, he said. I have a chart which goes back to the 1800s, and I can tell you that this particular period sticks out. But you have no way of knowing in advance when it will actually trigger. Trigger what? Trigger the collapse. One point he did make about timing is it likely will be quick and take the market by surprise. It looks stronger just before it isn't stronger, he said. Anyone who thinks they can forecast when a bubble will break is in for a disastrous experience. Well, Alan, as the former head of the Federal Reserve, the guy who rigged the economy, you kind of know when the bubble's going to burst, don't you, bud? Right? So if you play stock market, keep your eyes peeled. Same thing. When the stock market crashes again here in the U.S., it's going to happen. The money supply is going to tighten up. Jobs are going to tighten up. So, if you got a good job, hold on to it. If you want a better job, try to find one. Find something in a recession-proof industry. Because I think we're going into another recession. Or if you don't want to work, figure out a way to get by doing something else. What else do we got? There's a funny story here. The Federal Reserve made a Facebook post about avoiding scams, and it got destroyed by trolls. Carrie Wedler, the beautiful, indomitable Carrie Wedler, chiming off at the anti-media. Last August, the Federal Reserve came face-to-face with an army of trolls when it launched a public Facebook page. But whoever runs their social media doesn't appear to have learned much from the debacle. Last week, the loathed central bank attempted to advise its followers on detecting scams, and it didn't go well. Apparently, scammers attempt to swindle unsuspecting visuals by claiming to represent the Federal Reserve. So the bank decided to offer up some advice. Fed fact. I received a suspicious-looking email that claims to be from the Federal Reserve. Is it a scam? The Fed's official Facebook asked before linking users to an official guideline. Unfortunately for the page's social media manager, its followers had responses ready to go, and nearly all of them bluntly contended that the Fed itself is a scam. The Federal Reserve Bank was created in 1913 by members of the financial industry, crafted legislation to implement a central bank in the United States, a private, profit-driven central bank, I might add. Following a few modifications from concerned lawmakers, Congress passed the bill, ultimately empowering bankers to control the economy by giving them discretion over the money supply. To this day, the Fed is criticized for everything from quantitative easing, that's printing money and gifting it to the rich people in the government, to its fiat status, meaning that there's no hard commodity backing up the value of its paper currency, and its cozy ties with powerful financial hegemons like Goldman Sachs. Though it undergoes partial audits, current Fed Director Janet Yellen has resisted any full investigation. Many Americans are skeptical of the Fed's seemingly omnipotent power, and this pushback has thoroughly reflected in the comments responding to the Fed's post about scams. Go to the anti-media if you want to read some of those responses. Cool to see more and more people aware of how the financial system really works. We also had a great story today. It's a couple days old now from the Daily Reckoning. Fed enabled corporate kingpins to scalp billions. Check that one out if you want a little more coverage. Oh, Iran, part of the evil empire, axis of evil, so to speak, just signed its biggest ever car deal on Monday to build tens of thousands of cars annually under a joint venture with French automobile manufacturer Renault, buoying its manufacturing industry in defiance of the Trump administration's moves to isolate the country. Okay, again, they're blaming Trump there, but we've been implementing economic sanctions against our enemies for a very long time. We see them today against North Korea, Qatar, Iran, arguably Iraq, Yemen, Afghanistan, although they're kind of our buddy. The list goes on and on. China and Russia as well. It's funny, we work together with China and Russia on some things. We fight against them on other things. It just is what it is. Thank you all. I haven't seen a comment in a while, but I certainly appreciate all 50 of you here. We're into the horoscopes. So you want your horoscope read? Lay it on me. Again, I'm no astrologer, although I do have a pretty cool headband. And, I don't dabble in the occult, but I read my horoscope because it's in the newspaper. I'm having a 3-star day, Taurus. You are more in control of a work situation than you realize. I think that has to do with my work here at Wake Up News. Others look to you to take the lead. You might not want to take the reins, but you'll step up to the plate regardless. That's true. A serious conversation with a loved one could have a surprising outcome. Tonight, where the fun is. Anybody else want their horo read? Put it in there now or forever hold your peace. Oh, man, we're into it now. Transgender kids play open up at summer camp in San Francisco. I'm almost scared to touch that one, but here we go. Daniel Reichert chiming in. Let's save some time about North Korea. They will be vaporized in a New York second. I'm still waiting for a Russian strike from 40 to 50 years, right? Yeah, it's been a while. Anybody else got comments there? I'm scrolling down. Oh, wow, there's a lot of comments. Okay, there we go. Sorry, my comments were locked up. We want Libra, Aries, Cancer, and Scorpio. Here we go. We're back. Then we're going to get into the transgender kids summer camp, where they're encouraged to pick their gender every morning when they show up. Interesting times to live in. Libra, here we go. Shannon and Tammy. Thanks for tuning in. Let's go. 4-star day. Your playfulness couldn't lighten up someone's mood in the morning, but by mid-afternoon, your focus changes. You have a lot on your plate. You might want to defer to someone else. Know when you have had enough or need to head in a new direction. Tonight, run errands. Shannon and Tammy. Karen J. Bowden, here we go. Scorps. 3-star day. Not the best. Getting past a personal issue or a domestic matter could be trying. Expenses seem to be at the core of the problem. Allow more openness and encourage more sharing. Another person's ideas will prove to be more helpful than you had originally thought. Tonight, Karen, live for the moment. Cole Anthony Felton wants Aries. Here we go. 4-star day, Cole. It's business as usual after yesterday's lunar eclipse. You might feel as if you can take in a breath of fresh air, unless, of course, you live in the Rocky Mountain West, where it is smoky as right now. You know that you could have a strong reaction to what you hear midday. The more calm and centered you are, the better the outcome will be. Tonight, share news. So it sounds like they're telling you to share this video, Cole, and to stay level-headed about whatever you hear around midday. Derek Rogers, Cancer, 4-star day. One-on-one relating elicits strong results. You might be able to make a change that could have been on the back burner for a while. A boss could act in a most unexpected way, Derek. Can you deal with this person's unpredictability? Distance yourself if need be. Tonight, Derek Rogers, escape into the night. All right, moving along. So this is pretty wild. We've had this, the mainstream media will bash on people for all sorts of things. If you hold opinions outside the norm, you're a conspiracy theorist. You don't see an anti-war perspective in the paper. But the mainstream media just loves the notion of transgender and homosexuality and all these things. I'm not opposed to them, but it's an interesting trend to see how the mainstream media continually defends, alternative lifestyles and gender fluidity, this new concept where children are told that they can be a boy one day and a girl the next day, and it's perfectly normal. That wasn't perfectly normal a few years ago, but times change, right? At check-in each day, campers make a name tag with their pronoun of choice. Some opt for she or he, or a combination of she/he, or they, with no pronoun at all. Some change their name or pronouns daily to see what feels right. The camp in the San Francisco Bay Area city of El Cerrito caters to transgender and gender-fluid children ages 4 to 12, making it one of the only camps of its kind in the world open to preschoolers, experts say. Enrollment has tripled to about 60 young campers since it opened 3 summers ago, with kids coming from as far as Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and even Africa. Plans are underway to open a branch next summer in Colorado. Gender specialists say the camp's growth reflects what they are seeing in gender clinics nationwide, increasing numbers of children coming out as transgender at young ages. They credit the rise to greater openness and awareness of LGBT issues and parents tuning in earlier when a child shows signs of gender dysphoria or distress about their gender. A decade ago, this camp wouldn't have existed. Eventually, I do believe it won't be so innovative, said camp founder Sandra Collins. I didn't know you could be transgender at a very young age, but my daughter knew for sure at 2. Okay. It's funny. A lot of kids can barely talk at 2. It's funny. Kind of surprising to think they'd have it all figured out by then. There's little comprehensive data on young children who identify as transgender, but experts say as the number of young people coming to their clinics increases, the prevailing medical guidance has shifted. The favored protocol today is known as the gender affirmative approach, which focuses on identifying and helping transgender children to socially transition, to live as the gender they identify with rather than the one they were born with, until they're old enough to decide on medical options. Okay, apparently you can join the military and get a sex change operation. So have fun with that. I want to know these kids have a confident, happy, successful I want to show these kids what a confident, happy, successful trans person looks like, said Rainbow Day Camp director Andrew Kramer, 30, who goes by AK and came out as a transgender man at 26. We teach them they are normal, deserving of love, and not alone. Okay, so I don't have too much to say on this, but I will say we got a lot of great comments there. Thank you. You know, I don't know. You know, people. There have always been homosexual people. There have always been transgender people. There's no doubt about that. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's everybody is on a continuum of sexuality, and people are free to do whatever they want. But I have to say that we're in the middle of like a chemical warfare experiment against humanity. And I would argue that the rise in homosexuality and the rise in transgender and the rise in gender fluidity and all these things might not be entirely due to natural factors. It might have to do with the chemicals we're ingesting, the chemicals we're exposed to, and the propaganda in the mainstream media. You know, the kid sees a basketball player or a football player making millions of dollars, they're going to want to do that. If you normalize transgender and gender fluidity, more kids are going to experiment with that. But, you know, I'm not trying to bash on anybody here today. Can't stress that enough. But my concern is that these, you know, like these summer camps, you know, it's cool. Make the kids feel comfortable, safe, secure. Obviously, it's not the children's fault. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but, you know, if they're dealing with these issues, why is that? I think there's more to it than just, you know, it's like back in my generation, now we got the autism epidemic, we have gender fluidity, we have this crazy teen suicide rate, eclipsing homicides attributed to smartphones, perhaps. And in my generation, it was all about ADD. And I wrote my senior honors thesis in communication philosophy and pre-med on ADD. And at the time, the medical establishment was calling it a genetic disorder, right? It was genetic. ADD is genetic. It wasn't genetic. It was sociocultural, right? The solution was feeding kids fucking amphetamines. It still is. It's heartbreaking. It's tragic. And, Same thing with the transgender, gender fluidity thing. Oh, it's natural. It's genetic. It's not just natural. It's not just genetic. There's other factors contributing to the rise of gender fluidity and transgender children. I don't know how a 2-year-old can decide all those big things when they barely learn how to talk. Fixing the ACA, what would work? An informational talk by Catherine Schwartz, PhD. That's Monday, August 14th at the Teton County Library. Okay, that's coming up here, 6 p.m. Dr. Schwartz is a professor of health economics and policy at the Harvard School of Public Health. Her current research focuses on implementation issues related to the Health Care Reform Law, or the ACA. So that's that. Then we're into the distractions, the fluff. We got ads, just pages of ads, TV listings, weirdness and grief, a lot of fluff. This is kind of crazy. This kid in Australian teenager who went for a swim in Melbourne Beach and emerged with his feet covered in blood has stumped marine experts. Okay, it shows you they don't know everything, right? This poor kid attacked by some sort of creature in the ocean that made his legs rather bloody. But then we're into the fluff, the classifieds, the sports. As usual, we got 7 or 8 pages of classified ads here in Jackson Hole, but no affordable places to live for people who are making $10, $15, $20 an hour, right? It's heartbreaking to see a microcosm of a macro problem. We got a lot of comments there about the gender fluidity thing. It's funny. I'm willing to tee off on 9/11. I'm willing to tee off on the government, the banking system, all this stuff. I got really strong opinions. I'm not afraid to share them. But you look at the gender fluidity thing, I don't feel comfortable teeing off there. I tread lightly around that issue, right? Why? Because I've been conditioned to do so by the mainstream media, okay? And, the notion that, if you criticize people who are gay or transgender, that's a hate crime, right? I don't want to be guilty of hate crimes. So it's interesting. We're going to close out today with a quote from a sociology textbook written in 1942 by Kimball Young at Northwestern University. Handicaps to scientific thinking in sociology. Science is man's most fruitful way of observing, classifying, and interpreting the world and himself. It is a great cultural advance over magic and fiction as a way of dealing with serious problems. That's true. Sociology, in addition to the technical difficulties of deciding on adequate units to description and analysis and of finding applicable methods of study, is handicapped by much emotionalized thinking. Such thinking derives from tradition and from the persistent tendency of laymen and public leaders alike to assume that they can know the answers to social science problems without recourse to scientific study. Let us see what some of these handicaps are. Man follows his group. More than one wise man in history and the present world has repeated the expression, know thyself. And truly, man everywhere, primitive and modern, is interested in himself and in his immediate fellows. Yet more often than not, this interest takes the form of ethnocentrism. This means that individuals believe their group or society to be the center of the world, their values the highest, and their ethics the only correct one. Okay, goes on and on. Good to think about ethnocentrism. We see that in the mainstream media. Okay, we see that in the propaganda we're exposed to every day, right? Try to keep an open mind. Let's all stay aware, informed, and optimistic, right? The mainstream media is designed to distract us, depress us, divide us, deter us from taking actions. All these D words, right? It describes us. It tells us who we are, what we're meant to believe. But honestly, we're free to be whatever we want. If you want to be a gender fluid 2-year-old, I guess you're going to have to build a time machine because you're probably not 2. But it's a crazy world out there. There's a lot going on, and we might as well enjoy it. So stay active, stay aware, stay informed. And, if you find your voice and share it, it's very empowering. I encourage all of you to do that. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're in the 64th minute. We still have 48 viewers. Really appreciate you. If anybody's got any questions or comments, I'll take them now. We got so many comments, it's hard to read them all. And I certainly appreciate all of you tuning in. today. So thanks. Like it, share it, subscribe, get notifications, and I promise to keep going live for you as frequently as possible. Another thing we're going to announce pretty soon here at Wake Up News, if you've looked at our logo, it's kind of dated. It's kind of old school. Zach Coons built it. It's served us well for several years, but it's time for a new logo. So we're having a contest where you can design us a new logo and a new banner for the top of our Facebook page here. We'll also be using that on our new Wake Up News website that will launch soon, and big prizes for the winner. So if you want to help out Wake Up News, if you want your work featured here, we'll give you credit, obviously, for your work, and there will be a reward. Can't say any more about it now, but there'll be an official announcement coming up soon. Thank you all for tuning in. This is your boy, Max Mogren, signing off from beautiful Alpine, Wyoming, for Wake Up Wyoming here at Wake Up News. Appreciate all of you. Thanks so much for tuning in. One love. Peace.